Right, students, this is the last class. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave. He's my colleague and friend. We met only few months ago, but in this time we learned a lot from each other about how to work on green infrastructure. So last time I met, he gave me some answers about how to do well in an interview because I didn't have much interview in industry. And one of my students, Kami, she's here. She has opportunity to hear from Dave during that launch meeting, and I thought this is a great advice. Why don't we have this one for this class so that you all learn? Um, Again, this is just a limited in the sense that this is not the only thing you have to do. This is some tips that be based on Dave's own experience of interviewing lots of engineers or scientists like you. It's important that you hear from him because I don't have much really clue about those when it comes to industry. So thank you, Dave, for coming here and sharing your experience as well as your advice to students. Many of them will be maybe your, sitting with you in the interview in future. So they will apply for jobs. So that's very useful for them. Thank you for this opportunity for have you
Happy
here.
to do it. Always looking to try to add more Bruins to my team.
Oh, yeah, thank you. All right, so Dave, this is all yours. Continue talk as long you want. It's really no limit.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just start with a few remarks, and hopefully Sanjay and Cami can remind me some of what we talked about with some prompted questions when we were at lunch. But general introduction and background. I graduated UCLA in 2003, and I'm a bit of a rare one these days where I've been with the same company for the 17 years since then. I work for Michael Baker International out of our Santa Ana office and lead our water quality group. So water quality group for us is about 22 people. We're very focused on stormwater permit compliance. And so we work with municipalities, counties, private industry, utilities, to help them understand what their requirements are when they do a project and need to manage their stormwater discharges. And I work as part of a bigger surface water group at Michael Baker. Out of our Santa Ana office, we number about 60 engineers and environmental scientists. And so we're focused on hydrology and hydraulics, along with the actual design and putting together construction sheets to support projects, and our water resources practice overall, where you start to get into piped flow, water treatment numbers about 80. So a bit of a background on that, and overall Michael Baker offers all engineering services short of geotechnical. And so in-house we cover survey and planning and transportation, water resources, of course, part of the practice I'm in, land development. And so understanding how we can bring all those practices to bear on the engineering needs of today. And water's just been an exciting place to be. You're at a great place at UCLA with everything that's happening in LA and the efforts UCLA is leading with the Sustainability Grand Challenge, with the Safe Clean Water program going on in LA. A lot of great opportunities to see how water is really coming together, and people are trying to figure out how to use stormwater in ways that can augment water supply, as well as keeping things like beaches clean. So I think that'd be good for the background slide, Sanjay, if you want to jump to the next. When we had lunch, and again, the connection you have with Sanjay is great. We connected as part of the Safe Clean Water program that's happening in LA. If you're not aware, LA residents passed a parcel tax on themselves, with 70% of the population voting in favor of it. If you vote in LA, you had the opportunity to have a say in that a couple years ago. And with the focus on funding water quality and water supply projects. And as part of that, there's funding for scientific studies. And so we're hoping to put something together with Sanjay based on the research he's working on with biochar, and how we can roll that out to BMPs throughout the region. But after we had a meeting with LA County, we went to lunch and just got to talking about some of the challenges that I face as an engineer, but also as a manager of a group, and the characteristics we look for in young engineers. And a bit of a challenge. I mean, when we're looking to hire new graduates, it's not always about what the technical abilities are, because there hasn't been the opportunity to develop a lot of those. And I'd say, especially if you're going into water, maybe things have changed a bit since I was there. But I know when I graduated, I had maybe a open channel flow class and a hydrology class, but I had certainly never touched anything that had to do with water quality or water quality permits. And so a lot of times what I'm looking for don't have to do with exactly just hard skills or technical abilities. So I added a couple characteristics, or a few characteristics here that are of interest when I go to hire, and I can run through these and then we can move on to questions. But ultimately, I want people who are curious. It's a challenge to try to train somebody if there isn't really just an interest on their end, and it doesn't have to just be limited to work. I'm interested in hearing from people about what they do outside the office, and what types of things interest them and how they pursue those interests, because there's a lot of carryover as to how they're going to approach their problem solving at work. And that curiosity, the desire to figure something out is really key. We need problem solvers, people who are going to take the initiative to figure things out on their own. So it's first for a reason. I really look for that when I'm meeting with people. Communication is another huge one. You've likely heard this, but for me, one of the things that still sticks out about my education at UCLA was taking a technical writing class that was offered through the engineering school, and learning how to write for clarity. We may think that being an engineer is going to be a lot about numbers and focused on that, but the ability to communicate those thoughts. Sanjay and I were talking as this started that I'm in the midst of writing proposals right now. Being able to explain clearly to somebody how you're going to solve their problem, to convince them using words that you understand what their problem is and what their motivation is for needing to do this project. That ability to connect through words, and then ultimately get an interview with that client, and go into the room and answer questions appropriately and present to them. Being able to communicate in all different ways is huge. I'm probably not the first to tell you that. I think Warren Buffett is famous for saying that if you want to increase your earning power 50%, become a better communicator. And we certainly feel that. And so on that front, while on a resume as a new graduate, internships certainly won't hurt you. They're not going to necessarily get you the job. But a well-written cover letter that shows me that you understand a bit about what we do, and the ability to present yourself clearly is going to pique my interest. And I've hired a few people, or at least moved them along in the interview process, strictly based on having a cover letter that was impressive. So if you're going to spend some time somewhere, that's worthwhile. Reliability seems pretty easy. Half of getting there is just showing up. But we need to know that when a product has to get delivered, that we can count on the people we're working with. And so a real commitment to delivering and being a good teammate, working well with others is going to be really important. Client service, if you're thinking about going into the consulting world, at the end of the day, you're just there to serve at the pleasure of others, and really understand what their problems are, come up with solutions for them, and deliver for them, ultimately making their lives easier. And we practice this consistently in everything we do. So I have external clients that are cities or utilities or private companies, but I also have internal clients, my boss, other project managers that I support on their projects. And so learning to both lead and follow effectively is really key. And then finally, questions is not necessarily a characteristic, but the power of good questions is really important. Certainly during an interview, for me, it really shows whether somebody's processing what they're hearing and coming up with something that they want to know next is a really impressive trait for me. So as you're going through an interview process, coming in with questions that you've already developed based on what you've learned about the industry or a company are really great. And certainly coming up with questions as you're having a conversation with somebody you're interviewing with to demonstrate to them that you're listening, hearing, and comprehending is really powerful. So I can go into more depth on these, but I'd say for now that's some good opening thoughts, and would open it up to questions, or Sanjay or Cami, if there were things that I had touched on previously, we can circle to some of that.
Great. This is great. Any questions, students? If you have, this is the time, because the last point is asking good question. Here you can ask any question. It doesn't have to be good. Just ask, because this is all about your interest. Any questions related to applying for a job or anything else?
State of the industry, anything that's of interest.
I have a question. What struggles did you have when you were first entering the field?
I think one of the toughest things right away is you're put in this position where you're just asked to do what seem like really menial tasks. And it requires a lot of trust. And so maybe that's another piece of the interviewing process, is not just is trying to find somebody that you feel like you trust to do right by you. So with that struggle is you're doing these tasks, and it can be often be hard to see what the bigger picture is. Why am I going through this detailed process over and over again that maybe isn't super stimulating? But maybe unbeknownst to you, if you have a good manager, hopefully it is clear to you how what you're doing is feeding into something else, which is empowering your supervisor to take that information and move on to something that maybe 3 years from now you're going to be doing that's going to be a little more interesting. So having that patience, I think, is important to understand that there is going to be some growing and learning that you're going to have to do when you arrive in the industry. It's one of the things that certainly stands out from those early years.
Thank you.
That's a good question, Ashley. I have another question. One thing that I remember when I had 2 interviews in my life for industry. Both are for internship positions. So they asked me, they asked this question, like, tell me about yourself, why you are interested in our company. So very easy thing for us to do that time as a student is to, before going for any interview, I look for, what's this company about, but I don't know anybody and I don't really have much knowledge about it. I'm interested because I'm looking for a job, really, there is nothing more important than that, So, what are the things you could do? Because, nowadays, that time, there are not much information available. Nowadays, the resource is much more. LinkedIn, YouTube, so many things, developed after that, after my master's years now. So what are the advice you can tell for students to do before that interview, like that one night before, what are the questions they should ask themselves to become more familiar with the company? What are the things you as a client or no, as an interviewer expected
Mm-hmm.
for the students to know about your company, or what they should look for?
Yeah, social media is a great place to start. I know we are, as are most, are on LinkedIn and some of the other options, posting information about projects that we've won or are completing, things that are going on in the office. One thing that hopefully you can honestly say, but I would be trying to figure out what the culture at the company is like. That's a big piece of what is important to us, and will be more of a challenge in the current state when we all get back to the office. But fit is really important. We may find the most brilliant person out there, but if they're a jerk, we're probably not going to want to spend time with them. Like we're trying to find people that are enjoyable to be with. And so I know you'll see postings from us about, it was Halloween and there was this dress up, or it was Engineers Week, and so we were doing a egg drop off the building. Is it an employee-owned company versus privately held? If you can tease out different pieces of what may lead into a good company culture or a place that you think would be a good fit, those are really important things that if you can certainly find out about and then be able to comment on, would be great. Just straight searching on a browser for the company name and whatever type of work you're interested in, if it's stormwater or surface water, flood control. Pretty much every report we do now, it seems like, ends up, for a public agency at least, ends up online. And so if you can find some of that work that the company's done in an area that you're interested in, to see what was actually done on a project and then be able to comment on that more specifically, I think that would be impressive. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of stuff out there as you just Google terms that you might be interested in, trying to find out where people from the company maybe have spoke at a conference and what that topic was on. A lot of times those abstracts are still available online and will turn up in searches when I'm looking for different subjects on things. So yeah, I think scouring the internet for key terms for the service area and the company name. But yeah, culture and past projects, anything you could find on those would go a long way.
I think that's a very good advice, because those are the things that do to search about their own work. So it takes only 2-3 days, but they will be very familiar with the work they are going to do. If they are not interested, they may find that something they don't want to do, so they will not waste their time or somebody else's time. So that's a good thing.
No doubt, self-selection on both sides.
Yes, yes, yes. Any other questions before I ask? I don't want to ask all the questions.
I have another question.
Yes, go ahead.
In the past, what skills have you seen on a resume that really stood out to you?
Again, I would say it's difficult coming out of school. Exposure to probably, I would say exposure to GIS more than drafting. It probably falls in line, at least in the surface water world. That's helpful. A lot of all those things you would or will learn on the job, but coming in with the ability to function in GIS already would be great. With everything that can be done with data now, and the move to automate, coding skills certainly would catch my eye. And even more impressive would be potentially an understanding about how the ability to automate processes could benefit our industry. I know that's something we're all trying to figure out. So scripting and those abilities would certainly go a long way. And something our department is really just starting to dig into is machine learning and artificial intelligence. We do a lot of, believe it or not, there's a huge market to support stopping trash pollution in stormwater. And a lot of that takes visual inspection. And we've administered the Caltrans stormwater program for the past 2 decades since it started. And Caltrans is responsible for driving their freeways. 2 people in a car, 1 person driving, the other person looking out the window to see how much trash is on the side of the road. And so we've been pioneering an effort to do that with image recognition and machine learning. And as we've worked on that task order, it's become clear that those abilities have huge potential throughout the industry. If you're interested in water, certainly plenty there, but we're seeing it spread through all different pieces of civil engineering. So if there's an interest there, again, it goes back to the curiosity thing. Like if that's something that interests you, there would be no expectation of being an expert on it. But if it's something you're curious about and have looked into and at least have a cursory understanding and could maybe understand what some of the processes are and how those innovative skill sets could be applied to it. I'd say that's what I've seen in the past, and based on what we're starting to do now, what I think would be of interest in the coming years as well.
Thank you.
Great. Kami, you're Kami is right now she has interviewed a couple of, she asked questions more last time to you. Any struggle, Kami, recently that you've been going through while applying job? Or Dave, do you remember how many jobs you applied, or you just got lucky that you got a job, the one you applied?
Yeah, I'm the strangest out there. I had interned at this company for 3 summers. And even that I stumbled into my parents had a family friend who worked at the company, and I interned with them during the summers. I interned with KPFF more locally when I was at UCLA, and came home after graduation and went to just see some people in the office, and came away. I clearly graduated in a slightly different job market than what we're facing now.
Well, I think job market goes up and down. A few months ago, it was pretty good.
Shocking.
Does COVID affect your company, like in terms of hiring process?
Hiring, maybe not so. We had a handful of people, at least locally, that we had interviewed and decided to hire as this was all unfolding. And so we've had to onboard them as this has all been going on, which has certainly been a challenge to not be able to start building those relationships right away. I think everybody's been fairly surprised how smoothly the transition went with no ability to prep for it. The technology has made it fairly seamless for everybody to move home. Like I mentioned before, culture though is a big thing, and especially was in my department. And so to not have the ability to be face-to-face with people and build those relationships is, I'm interested in what the long-term impact is. Our big concern with having people work from distance has always been that it would make things easier for people to move on, because it potentially just makes things a little more of just a job. Whereas when you're in the building with everybody, I've known many of the people I work with now I've known for 20 years. And so they're not just the people I work with. Like they're some of the longest relationships of my life. And so when one of us needs something from the other one to get something delivered, it's not that your coworker is asking for something. It's that this person that their families, their kids, you want to deliver for them because they are your friend. and so that's my long-term concern with COVID, is that some of that may start to erode, and what are the challenges going to be to continue to build that culture. In terms of the actual hiring, the question mark looming for all of us is what's going to happen to state and local budgets for funding projects, and what's going to be considered essential, and what is where are the projects going to come from. Home builders we work with a number of them, have for the most part continued on, that they think this is going to be a fairly short blip, but with tax revenues so down and needing to prioritize for paying for unemployment insurance and healthcare, the wonder is how is that going to be reflected in public works budgets going forward. So it's all going to be driven on is there the work to do. So yes, it impacts us on a few different fronts.
Thank you for your answer. I have another question as well. What would you ask during the interview?
Of the person who's interviewing me?
Sorry.
Or what would I ask an interviewee?
Yeah.
We keep it fair. I don't really try to put anybody in too tough of a position. You hear some of these random questions that get asked at tech companies of how many paper clips fit in a stadium or something. I'm never gonna probably go down that road. I am gonna try to get a sense of the person again, and understand who they are beyond just a graduating student, and what their interests are. I want somebody who's well-rounded and has an interest beyond whatever work is going to be. Let's see. Trying to understand when things were tough. Generically, tell me about a time you failed or something, and want to understand how resilient somebody is, or again, what kind of problem solver they are. So we all get ourselves into trouble with decisions we make. How did you respond when that happened? Having a failing or a struggle isn't something that would be held against, but understanding what the response was would be very much of interest.
I see. So it's more like behavioral questions rather than technical questions?
For somebody coming out of school as a new graduate, yeah. If you're coming out with your master's, I might be a little more interested in what you focused on and what you studied. And if that's the case, I think that's where the opportunity to get somebody to communicate with you and understand what kind of communicator they are is, there's really a lot of potential there. If you are coming out with your master's and had to pick an area of study, I would hope that you can clearly explain that area of study to me, even if it's more than I know. And if it's more than I know, that's probably a good thing. I'd be preferring to hire people who know things that I don't, and could take our department in a new direction. I'd say another one would just be, which we haven't done as much, but we're trying to get to, is just having people explain something that's part of their life that they're interested in. Again, pressing on that communication ability. What are you interested in? Explain this piece of it to me. Again, whether I understand what it is or not, is the person capable of conveying the message clearly?
Wow. It's very meaningful. Thank you for your answers.
You got it.
Yeah. But in terms of skill sets, what are the hard skills that are you looking for? No, it's not looking for, but it's more like needed for the industry.
That's good. So at its base, I work in surface water, and so we need people who understand how water works, and this has been a bit of a challenge for my department. So I want engineers who understand hydrology and hydraulics, or at least are going to show the ability to understand that. They don't just have to go down a modeling road, but knowing how water moves is key. But for me, it's then, starting to understand, how do pollutants move in the water? What are the effective ways to remove those? While we're trying to meet that minimum measure of removing pollutants, what else can we do that has benefit, like augmenting water supply or community improvements? So there's a number of skill sets there. There's, more detailed, if you want to get into a technical path of modeling, there's certainly a road there. And we see a lot of that and need that understanding. We need people that are interested in really being engineers and designing structures to hold water and get it into the ground, or detain it while we can meter it into treatment. And then we need people thinking about what's next. I think what we touched on earlier with being able to automate and script processes, while also turning some of it over into kind of deep machine learning. I know that kind of touches all of it. I'd say we need all of it, and everybody doesn't have to know how to do it all. But people who can focus in on some of those, or have a broad understanding of them, of how they fit together. That overall 1,000-foot level thinking is needed as well.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
Just a follow-up question on that, Dave, because you said there are so many skills that is desirable, but obviously one students may not have everything.
Yeah.
At the same time, even let's say somebody is really good at one thing, doesn't mean that every project has that skill requirement. So invariably that student has to learn at that company during the process. So how much learning or how much time they get, or in your company, what kind of steps you take to ensure that your employees are trained or learn, or that.
Yeah, and I would say of all those things, my expectation wouldn't be that most people coming out of school would know which of those paths they want, or even that those are the paths that we need. But an openness to learning and willingness to learn is really what we're looking for. So, we hire people as assistant engineers. They've changed the way you can take the PE exam now, but I don't know, you can take it a lot more quickly, at least pieces of it. And so imagine you spend a couple years as an assistant engineer, you can become a PE after 2 years. But those early years are really important to try to spread yourself around and pick up a number of those pieces. Like you pointed out, Sanjay, somebody who's too specialized starts to lose value when they're needed to help out elsewhere. And so getting yourself a broad base, for instance, if you were to pick surface water, of understanding hydrology and hydraulics, but also being involved in projects where you need to put together a set of plans. Also trying to get some experience where you're helping to comply with the municipal permit, so that you get a taste of those and understand how they all fit together. You could spend your first 4 or 5 years really trying to develop that skill set and get some proficiency in all of those pieces. Patience, I mentioned earlier, is a challenge. We get people, which is great. We want people who are go-getters and really want it, but feeling like they're ready for management and leading projects sooner than we recognize they are. And so tempering those expectations and understanding that there is a lot of learning that goes in before you're ready to be that face to the client and lead those projects. There's no set time schedule. Some people get there faster than others. But I'd say that also circles back to that trust as you're interviewing, of finding out whether you're working for somebody who you trust to be developing you. There certainly are people out there who will happily put you in a box and teach you to do one thing very well so that you get efficient at it and can be profitable. But that may not be, the best for your career long term. So finding somebody who you trust to develop you and listen to what your career interests are, so that you get those other opportunities is really, really important. But yeah, I'd say a handful of years starting out to really build a solid foundation of different skills. And then, you could really start to specialize after that. And then I think I was 7 or 8 years in before I really got my first opportunities at real big project management and task leadership. I had been prepped to succeed at that point. So I probably wanted it sooner, but by the time I was given the opportunity, I was ready to succeed. And that was good. So, it could be the better part of a decade before, you're really feeling established and expert in many things. But a recognition that there's a lot of learning to happen, I think is important.
Great. One question comes specific to your company is like, it's an international company. You said there are many locations, I assume, in the state or in US. How much collaborations that you see between your offices, and how do you handle that? Being working in one place.
Yeah, especially with our group with surface water, like I shared, we've got about 60 surface water professionals in my office, and then between our Ontario and Carlsbad offices, we probably number about 80 or 90. So we are one of the centers of excellence for surface water for the company, and we support projects across the state and in our region, from Seattle to Utah to Arizona, as far out as Florida at times. The technology certainly helps now, and everybody's gotten a lot more comfortable with it at this point. But it's a challenge of getting pulled in a lot of directions. While international is in the name, it more means we're open to international work than have a ton of it right now. So it is mostly in the US, but we're over 3,000 professionals in the US, spread across the country. And the intent, you see the Wolfpack logo on there, is that there is a strength in that pack, and we try to support each other. And so while somebody may win a project in Chicago that has a surface water element, they may not have the expertise for it. And so the expectation is that we're ready to jump in and support that so that they can deliver for their client. And ultimately we can grow surface water throughout the country. So, it's certainly a mindset that we're there to support and help out when the requests come in, which is fun to be working in different areas and start to see things grow in different offices as they get a taste of what we do.
And now I know the story behind the logo. Something I thought what. So is it like that? Is this a common that somebody, let's say you are comfortable here because you grow up here, or you are here and now, if somebody want to move from one office to another, how common it is for them to have that done?
I'm about to experience it. Somebody who had been part of our department is out in Utah now, but is looking to come back to California, and we're gonna welcome that. From the company's perspective, if we've got I guess it depends what type of employee you are, but if we've got somebody who's an asset to the company and they are committed to moving somewhere else, there's a recognition that it's better we keep them with the company. We're all going to benefit from that, than risk losing them to a competitor in a market where we are. And so I would say it doesn't work in every opportunity, and sometimes if people are making a physical change, they're just looking to make a professional change too. But there is certainly opportunity, I would say, both physically with different offices, as well as just moving in between departments as well. It's not like people are jumping from one department to another, but it is kind of nice. You know, in our Santa Ana office, we offer transportation, environmental planning, water resources, surface water, traffic engineering, land development, all those different things. And so we have in-house specialists that if you have a need, you can go talk to them. But if you were to realize, I'm actually not that interested in surface water, I really like land development or transportation more, same situation that, you know, if you're committed to making that change and the option is going to be that you're going to leave the company or you're going to go to a new group, you know, the option, the choice is usually to find a place for you within the organization in a different group. And so, yeah, nice to have that size and flexibility.
Great. Any questions, students? I'll stop recording so that, you know, we can talk without having to worry about. All right. So let me stop recording now. Then thank you on the on the record that you are here. You know, this is I hope that you will be open to come sometimes in future. Not like
Definitely.
every month. You know, I would say every year at least once. That's what because this class is about. Because I think, you know, students, it's good to hear different batch of students similar advice.
I'd be happy to.
Thanks, Dave. So.